All right, thanks to the New Zealand Landcare Trust for inviting the Australian Landcare Council members over here. Great opportunity for us to share ideas and tell our stories. So our property, Yan Yan Gurt West, was taken up by the Stewart family in 1905, and it's in southern Victoria, and we produce prime lambs and have integrated native and other vegetation to the property with agroforestry as well. It's in a long-term 700mm rainfall zone, but over the last 14 years it's been more like about 540. And it's not actually all my work that has gone to this farm. It's been a family and a collaborative effort, and with my wife Jill we manage the property, and Jill is here representing the East Otway Landcare Group. So the property is 230 hectares, and you can see the location, if I can get this little pointer going, there in southern Victoria. These are just a couple of shots of the farm as it is today. I'll go through these fairly quickly. But the farm wasn't always like that. In fact, it was quite different. The following shots were taken in the 1970s, 1980s on the property, and they're the sorts of issues that we were faced with. So why did we take a new approach? Well, as a family we decided the property wasn't sustainable as the way it was going, so we needed to do something different. Just shown here with my father, back in the 60s, started planting some native trees and thought it was a good idea to bring some biodiversity into the operation and attract the birds, so he started to lead the way in a small way to give us ideas about the future direction. The local Landcare group started in 1988, and we became foundation members, and also a young fellow, Rowan Reid, bought a disused or a run-down property nearby and started revegetating that using agroforestry to improve the property. And also we looked at the natural systems around us and thought about how can we mimic the functionality of the previous ecosystems. They were the main drivers. So what do? We set up a whole farm plan in 1992 with land class subdivisions as indicated by the different colours. And then we started revegetating, and there are some before and after photos there, 5-year time frame. We revegetated along land class boundaries, riparian zones, drainage lines, and also fenced out salt affected areas and waterlogged areas. And we really tried to build in multiple values to the planting. So with the Yan Yan Gurt Creek being revegetated here, we put a lot of biodiversity. About 40 species were planted in that planting to get the ecology happening, to get the integrated pest management working. And we also wanted to have some tall trees to protect the soil and protect the pastures and protect the stock. So we brought the fences out a bit wider and developed some agroforestry plantations as well for high pruning, for high quality soil log production. And that's how it looks today with the pruned logs. Another before and after of the landscape. Another before and after showing the land class subdivision where we have a fine sandy clay loam here and a heavy clay earth there, using the trees to demarc the land classes and to plant them along those lines. But those blue gums were in a joint venture with Midway Timber Products for harvesting, and so the trees were eventually harvested. But whilst it looks crooked there, they do actually grow back, and that's taken about 12 or 14 months after harvest. Containment paddocks are developed where we've got an area of land with heavy soil protected by trees. We can put stock there and feed them during drought times and protect the environment. Soil logs used to protect a gully eroded area using Pinus radiata for future timber production. With the property, we have 17% of the farm revegetated. Of the 230 hectares, 17% has been revegetated, and that has given us a 23-kilometre interface with the property, with the pasture system. Gives us considerable wind protection for the stock, and there's a lot of organic matter blowing out in the paddock, you know, from the leaves and the bark, becoming incorporated into the soil biota and hopefully improving our carbon soil content. Chicory and plantain crop being protected for our prime land production. Another before and after shot with my mother in the turnip crop. Fencing out dams has been a priority. Nutrient management, aesthetics and timber production. Protecting remnants has been a key focus. Here we have a direct seeded site program where we have direct seeded 1.5 kilograms of seed, 19 species collected locally, direct seeded on a contour of about 3 to 4 metres wide to reduce the effect of erosion, and the result shown thus, to give us good protection for the stock and improving the landscape. And of course now we have an area where we can put off-shear sheep with a drop-down fence. We also try to keep the old trees in the landscape for habitat for bats and for birds which require nesting hollows, and hopefully sugar gliders as well. Another land class subdivision, an example of that, this part of the landscape here, and these landscapes get a lot of drainage coming down through the hills here, and it gets very waterlogged and anaerobic in these areas here. So this has become sort of a dry area here, and this can get very waterlogged. So we've used the trees to demarc the landscape into its land classes to improve the grazing opportunities and pasture management. And that is the design. So the design is we have spotted gum on the outside, understory spotted gum, understory spotted gum, and the spotted gum are being high pruned, and that slide was shown earlier, but it just demonstrates the high pruning of the spotted gum for saw logs and the understory there as well for wind protection and ecological management. And that's how we prune the trees. We strap the ladder to the tree and high prune up to about 6, 6.5, sometimes 7 metres. Fencing out salt patch is also something that we've done, and that was a degraded site which has been now used for off-shears, sheep haven if we require it, and it's become a great bird haven and it's connected to the other plantings. We've now observed 106 bird species on the property, and this slide shows the accumulated data of 5 years of collection of bi-monthly data for bird observations over 8 different vegetation classes throughout the property, so that we can get a better handle on the bird populations and the types of vegetation which attract them. Nutrient management is important. We have a seed orchard with spotted gum, and from that spotted gum seed orchard there's also some sugar gum there as well. We've got some product development. We've had firewood. The first seed harvest was done a year ago. Some of the trees were identified as poor performing families within the seed orchard because all the trees are tagged. The poor performing trees were harvested and sold to our local Otway Agroforestry Network members for shiitake mushroom growing. We've had beehives in there as well for honey production, and the trees will also be managed for saw logs so that over time we can actually get some high quality timber. The seed collection process has a cherry picker which reaches up to 28 metres, so therefore we can collect seed and manage for saw logs at the same time. So we're always trying to focus on the multiple values and other production we can get from the system. This is our fencing out dam project. This is an aerial photograph taken of a dam which has been badly eroded with stock, so we need to fence that out. And that's the area there that's been fenced out up here, and we've been planting that out with all sorts of species, and mainly Banksias, 21 varieties of Banksias, and we're looking at trying to encourage our daughters to maybe get into the cut flower trade and use Banksias. Other species being used, bush tuckers, lemon myrtle, and also roundleaf mint and river mint, and other native species that we encourage encouraging our Otway Agroforestry Network members to participate in. And we have an advisory program, well it's a peer group mentoring program where the Otway Agroforestry Network pays other farmers to talk to other farmers. We give them professional training. We've had government funding to support that. Social benefits. Family tree planting day is a brochure each year. Been doing that for about 14 years. And I don't think anyone would disagree with that statement. The links between integrated trees and shrubs and food and fibre production. That calculation was done from the Australian Institute of Agricultural Science carbon calculator, and we fed our data into that. So from the farm there's a total of 67 tonnes of livestock products, and as shown up there, at the same time we're getting saw log and pulpwood being growing at 208 tonnes per year, and it hasn't affected our stocking rate, so it's an add-on extra production. Been a lot of focus with our network development. Otway Agroforestry Network, Upper Bowen Landcare Network, East Otway Landcare Group we're involved with, Master Tree Grower Program which has evolved out of this, and a big focus on bringing science into the landscape, and particularly through the peer group support program. One of our local young land carers has come up with this graphic. This is a collaborative effort here with the Norman Wettenhall Foundation as funders for this project, which is called Linking Environment and Farms, the Upper Bowen Landcare Network, the Otway Agroforestry Network to come up with this leaf program. Consider our property in the context of a catchment, the Yanyangur catchment, is where the property sits, and it's been part of a larger project to develop a sustainable catchment management program. That's the neighbour's property, so it just doesn't, it's not just on our place, it extends beyond our borders, connecting the wildlife corridor, which is now about 17 kilometres long. And you'll note there the revegetation over this catchment has gone from 6% in 1990 to 21% in 2002, and other figures there. That's two properties, not one, so it shows the connectedness. They're the objectives. So I just want to mention just a few messages which have come to my mind after thinking about these issues for a long time. These are my key messages. Common theme that we've heard throughout the day, no surprises there. I think this is a critical one, bringing the science down to the ground level, bring it down to earth. Support what Mel and Darren were talking about, the CMA or Catchment Management Authority, the regional model if you like. I think that we should be supporting that and strengthen it, but don't let them take over. That's the last one. Time's up, it says there. A bit of a nervous start, but I made it in the time. I apologise for being so quick, but I want to give you a snapshot of the variety of things just for the discussion and the stimulation of ideas.
the challenge, how to get started. Someone, oh, you're just going to bring him across. Well, that's going. Kia ora and g'day, and I'm afraid that's about as bilingual as I get. My name's Brett De Hayr, and as Heather mentioned, I'm the National Landcare Facilitator. Basically, I try to do at the national level what a lot of people here do at the local level, and as you'll appreciate, it's a lot like mustering cats or shoveling frogs, but we all try to get there in the end. Andrew's given us a great snapshot of Landcare in Australia from a local practitioner's perspective of the journey he and his family have gone through on their property, and I'm going to try and talk about some of the broader issues going forward. So these are just my perspectives, so if you like them, good. If you don't, too bad. Landcare in Australia, it's been through some immense changes over the last 25 years, and it continues to do so. Although sometimes we get the criticism that it's seen as a tree planting movement dominated by old people, it's potentially much more relevant today than it was 25 years ago. And today we now face probably a broader set of biophysical changes than we did at that stage, not wanting to downplay the challenge that people faced. And there are also significant changes going on in society at the same time. Governments across the world at the moment are grappling with how to respond to issues such as food security, protecting the environment in a more variable climate with new areas of arable land, rapidly increasing demand, and potentially less water and diminishing fossil fuel supplies than we've had in the past. While some of these issues aren't maybe of direct relevance to us in our own patches, they will impact on both countries in a significant way going forward. We do live in a truly global economy, and we all do share the same environment. Some of those issues, such as population, the FAO estimates that globally food production will need to increase by over 70% by 2050 to account for increases in population as it passes 9 billion. The CSIRO in Australia estimates that over the next 50 years, globally, that we'll have to produce as much food over that time as we have done in the last 500 years. And you know, how do you prove this stuff? Well, this is an extrapolation, but it's one of the best snapshots, I think, of some of the challenges going forward. And when you think of the scale of the challenge that we have, given that the advances that we had during the Green Revolution were largely based on fossil fuel inputs, oil-based fertilisers, herbicides, irrigation, development of new arable areas, all of which are going to be increasingly limited as we go forward. So the scale of the challenge is significant. And at the same time, we're going to need to produce more with less. We're going to have to balance environmental systems, which themselves are going to be under increasing stress through growing urbanisation and climatic stresses. The situation is beginning to force governments to consider how they're going to respond to multiple changes, not do what governments traditionally do, is respond to things through individual agencies, because the challenge is too big and the resources aren't there. And at the same time, how do we engage the community? Because governments can't do this on their own. It's going to require changing governments. It's going to require not regime change, but changes in how government works, but also changes in society, how we involve the community in identifying and implementing innovative solutions, because this is what Landcare is about. Landcare is a social movement that's working on implementing changes in our landscapes, and it's ideally placed to play a part in this going forward, because it's always done this as a living example of thinking globally and acting locally. As many of you know better than I do, Landcare's a great example of how to deliver multiple outcomes that allow improvements in the environment, increase sustainability in food production, and lead to increases in soil carbon or the reduction in emissions. Things like minimum tillage, agroforestry, improved fertiliser usage, and the list goes on. These are all traditional Landcare activities. A number of commentators are talking about the next green revolution or the greener revolution. And in Australia, Landcare could form an integral part of a solution going forward because it can deal with multiple issues. Landcare in Australia is very hard to define, and my definition will be probably different from nearly every other Australian in the room. That's the beauty of it. It is what you want it to be. It's group-based activity, and they can be branded groups. There are many productive agriculture groups. We've got coast care. There are a number of Indigenous activities, urban land care, junior land care, river care, a range of different community groups. Government at the federal, local and state levels, and individual land managers, and the corporate sector also plays an important role. We've got a number of support structures from the Australian Landcare Council, my position, Landcare Australia Limited, and the Natural Resource Management Groups, or CMAs. Sorry, I'll just go back to that one. But it's also important to recognise that it's not only the biophysical challenges that have both changed and increased over the time. Society has changed as well over the last 25 years. When Landcare started in Australia, it was predominantly had a predominantly rural focus on issues such as revegetation and salinity. It rapidly became very diverse into the areas I've mentioned. It's this amorphous nature of Landcare that has allowed it to survive the vagaries of government participation, but also makes it very difficult to give the movement focus and to have it work together. As I said, Landcare in Australia is not a single organisation. It's now probably best defined as a social movement. No one group can control it, direct it or represent it. The challenge is how do we link those various parts of the Landcare movement in Australia so that they see a shared sense of purpose, share information and reach out to new parts of the community. If we can do this, Landcare in Australia really can evolve and prosper and reach its true potential. Also, when Landcare started in Australia, it was very much focused on achieving changes in our landscape. An unintended benefit which has arisen in many communities has been the increase in social capital and resilience that we've seen. The benefits of this have probably been best demonstrated during the Victorian bushfires, the decadal drought that we've had, floods in Queensland and New South Wales, Here, Landcare groups did very much form the social fabric that were needed in these communities during times of stress and formed a framework for a response. How you measure that benefit and capture it has been a real challenge for us. As I said before, in the last 25 years, the world's changed and Landcare has changed as well. We see fewer people in rural areas and less labour on farms. People in general are not wanting to attend regular meetings. They don't want to be part of permanent single issue groups. We see a decline overall in the number of people volunteering and regularly being part of regularly one organisation, and also significant urbanisation. Also, the advent of social media means that people now have access to a far greater amount of information. They don't have to do it all locally, mouth to mouth, for want of a better word. All of these means that we need to re-evaluate how Landcare operates. An emerging area of opportunity and interest is social media. We've seen rapid improvements in telecommunications, and it's revolutionised the way people are communicating. When Landcare started in Australia, it had to be done locally, face-to-face, to share information. There was no other way. And whilst that will still form the bedrock of Landcare in Australia going forward, we now have social media and telecommunications improvements gives us the tools for individuals and groups to link up with others of common interest locally in regions, in different states, across the country and across oceans. It's an opportunity that we haven't seen before. Many Landcare groups across the country are beginning to experiment with various forms of social media and seeing what works best for them. Governments are also beginning to think about it. People are seeing the opportunities to share information with other land carers, but also how to reach out to the broader community and make the Landcare community bigger than it is, and bypass mass media. Social media is also likely to play a major role going forward, but it's only just another tool. It certainly isn't a silver bullet. Just on a couple of specific local issues, the carbon market officially kicks off in our country mid-year. A lot of people see this as very much a double-edged sword. Farmers know it's going to increase costs in many cases. Those were probably going to increase anyway due to our fossil fuel requirements. but people are also looking at the benefits that may emerge. In Australia, agricultural emissions aren't included in our scheme, but avoided emissions and sequestration on farm, there is the opportunity there for tradable credits. So that's very much an emerging area, what might emerge on what's called the Carbon Farming Initiative. Also, farmers know all too well that input costs are going up. So they're very interested in research or tools that might reduce their reliance on some of those aspects, but also productive gains that might be reached through things like soil carbon. It's probably the #1 issue I get raised from farmers across the country, very interested in what that means in a productive sense, a little interested in the market stuff, but mostly from production. A couple of activities going on in the country, a significant investment in research and development at the moment. That's being driven by climate change and emissions, but many of the benefits are going to translate, I think, in production related activies and environment related activities. It's the most significant injection of new research funding that our country has seen for a very long time. Also a biodiversity fund at just under $1 billion. In summary, it's designed to fund the things that the carbon market won't do. So we know the challenges through monoculture plantations. The biodiversity fund in some areas will hopefully also encourage biodiverse plantings. And we have the decisions being made from the federal government about now as what it does with its $2 billion investment in sustainable agriculture and the environment program, the sort of area that Landcare operates in. So it's a very pivotal time for us. What role will Landcare have? Big question mark. We have a lot of activity at the moment. I'd have to say I don't think we have the vision that we had 25 years ago. So we certainly don't have a way forward. There are a lot of questions being asked at the moment. But hopefully I think governments have realised that it can only do so much, and if it's going to get real change, it actually does require the community to be involved, and that people are both the problem and the solution. Finally, Landcare in Australia needs to be seen as more than just a tree planting movement that started over 25 years ago and is dominated by old volunteers. It is this, and it's much more than that. It's grown to be a diverse social movement, working on old established issues like revegetation and weed control, and emerging issues like soil carbon and precision agriculture. It's extremely diverse in our country, ranging from junior land care, coast care, bush care, production agriculture and Indigenous groups. It's a challenge and an opportunity. 25 years ago in Australia, Landcare was the answer to many of the major landscape scale challenges that faced the country at that point. Today, Landcare is still critical in responding to these issues going forward. Landcare could provide a way forward in addressing multiple issues that are of local, national and global importance. But Landcare in Australia needs to be prepared to evolve along with these changing issues and changes in society, and ensure that both society and decision makers continue to see it as both current and relevant. There are divergent views on Landcare in Australia. Some people like to see it very much as a frozen model and leave it the way it is, and others say we need to change. Countries such as Australia and New Zealand are well placed to benefit from the growth in global demand for food, but we will both need to be more innovative and holistic in our responses and more outward looking and linking up with other countries in developing what these solutions are. The challenges facing both our countries are likely to require more cooperation and the sharing of ideas and innovative solutions. And this is really what Landcare does best, people learning from people and achieving change. Thank you very much.